Have you ever wondered what happens to a soul that breaks the sacred marriage vow? Can someone who betrays their spouse still find mercy? And what did one of the holiest priests of the 19th century see when he looked into the heart of a woman who sought love outside her marriage? Turin, 1862. The Industrial Revolution is tearing Italy apart. Factory smoke chokes the sky. Families crowd into tenements. Women work 16-hour shifts for pennies, while their husbands drink away what little they earn. Marriage is survival, not romance. And in this grinding poverty, something ancient is breaking. His name is Giovanni Melchiorre Bosco. The world calls him Don Bosco. He is 47 years old. For 21 years, he has walked the slums of Turin hearing confessions, sheltering orphans, pulling boys from prison cells. He is known for two things that terrify people. He can read souls, and he sees visions of the dead. On a February morning in 1862, a woman comes to his confessional at the oratory of St. Francis de Sales. She is 31 years old, married for 9 years, 3 children. Her husband is a mason who comes home drunk most nights. She kneels. She begins. Don Bosco sits motionless behind the grate. His eyes close. And then he sees something that will haunt him for months. He sees her soul. It is not what she tells him. It is what God shows him. The Catholic Church has always taught that marriage is indissoluble. Christ said it plainly in Matthew 19, verse 6. What God has joined together, let no man separate. The sixth commandment is clear. You shall not commit adultery. But in Turin, in 1862, that commandment is being shattered in thousands of bedrooms across the city. The church records from that decade show separation requests rising by 40%. Adultery cases flood the ecclesiastical courts. Women are asking priests what to do when their husbands beat them. Men are asking if they can leave wives who refuse them. The institution of marriage, built over centuries, is collapsing under the weight of industrial brutality. The statistics tell a brutal story. In 1860, the average marriage age for women in Turin was 19. For men, 24. Most marriages were arranged by families based on economic necessity, not romantic love. A young woman from a poor family would marry a mason or a factory worker, not because she loved him, but because her family needed the dowry payment and one less mouth to feed. The husband would marry her, not because he desired her, but because he needed someone to cook, clean, bear children, and perhaps earn extra income by taking in laundry or sewing. Within the system, adultery flourished in ways the church records only hint at. A study of Turin's ecclesiastical court records between 1850 and 1870 shows that of the 372 adultery cases brought before the court, 241 involved women. But historians now believe these numbers are drastically underreported. Most adultery never reached the courts because to bring a case required money, witnesses, and a willingness to publicly destroy your family's reputation. Poor families could afford none of these. So the sin stayed hidden, the marriages limped along, and the souls suffered in silence. Don Bosco saw this suffering every day. The women who came to his confessional were not wicked. They were drowning. They were trapped in marriages that gave them no joy, no comfort, no tenderness. They worked 16 hours in textile mills, came home to husbands who were drunk or violent or indifferent, put their children to bed in rooms without heat, and lay awake wondering if this was all life would ever be. And when a man showed them kindness, when someone looked at them as if they mattered, when a merchant or a neighbor or a coworker offered them a moment of gentleness in a world of relentless hardness, some of them said yes. And then they came to Don Bosco, terrified, ashamed, broken, asking if God could ever forgive them, asking if there was any way back, asking if their souls were lost forever. This was the work that exhausted him. Not the hours in the confessional, not the physical labor of building the oratory, but the weight of looking into the eyes of a woman who had just told him the worst thing she had ever done, and finding the words to tell her that God still loved her, that there was still hope, that she could still be saved, but that salvation would require her to do something almost impossibly hard. She would have to go back to the life she was trying to escape. She would have to choose fidelity to a husband who did not deserve it. She would have to love children who reminded her every day of the cage she was in. And she would have to kill the one thing that made her feel alive, the memory of being wanted. Don Bosco knows this. He hears hundreds of confessions every week. He has heard every variation of human misery. But this woman is different. She confesses to adultery, once, 3 months ago, with a merchant who came through her neighborhood selling fabric. She was lonely. Her husband had not touched her in a year. The merchant spoke kindly to her. He returned the next day. They met in an abandoned warehouse near the Po River. It lasted 20 minutes. She has not seen him since. She tells Don Bosco she is sorry. She says she wants absolution. She promises never to do it again. Don Bosco listens. He does not interrupt. When she finishes, he is silent for a full minute. Then he speaks. He tells her that her confession is incomplete. She is confused. She has told him everything. What more does he want? Don Bosco says quietly, "You have confessed the act, but you have not confessed the longing. You are still seeking him in your heart." The woman freezes. How does he know? She has not spoken this aloud to anyone, not even to herself. Don Bosco continues, "You pray for your husband to change, but you do not pray for your own heart to be changed. You ask God to send you comfort, but you have already decided where that comfort should come from. You still look for the merchant when you walk through the market. You have invented conversations with him in your mind. You have imagined leaving your children to be with him. This is not sorrow. This is planning." The woman begins to weep. It is true. All of it. She thought no one could see, but Don Bosco sees. And if Don Bosco sees, then God sees. And then Don Bosco tells her what he saw. He saw her soul in the moment of her death. He saw her standing at the edge of eternity. And he saw where she would go if she died in this state. Not to hell. Not yet. But to a place of purification. Purgatory. He describes it. A room with no windows. A weight pressing on her chest that never lifts. The faces of her 3 children looking at her through a veil she cannot cross. The knowledge that she can never undo what she has done. The unbearable awareness of every moment she chose her own desire over the vow she made before God and her husband and the church. And worst of all, the isolation. Complete separation from the communion of souls. She is alone in a way she has never been alone on earth, and she stays there for decades. Don Bosco tells her that the only way to escape this fate is not just to stop the sin, it is to kill the longing, to confess not just what she did, but what she still wants to do, to bring the hidden thing into the light. The Catechism of the Catholic Church, paragraph 2381, states that adultery is an injustice. The one who commits adultery fails in his commitment. He does injury to the sign of the covenant, which the marriage bond is. He transgresses the rights of the other spouse and undermines the institution of marriage by breaking the contract on which it is based. He compromises the good of human generation and the welfare of children who need their parents' stable union. But the teaching goes deeper. Paragraph 2380 states that adultery refers to marital infidelity, when 2 partners, of whom at least one is married to another party, have sexual relations, even transient ones, they commit adultery. Christ condemns even adultery of mere desire. Adultery of mere desire. This is what Don Bosco sees in the woman's soul. The act is over, the man is gone, but the desire remains, and the desire is the poison. The woman asks Don Bosco how she can kill something inside her that feels stronger than her will. Don Bosco gives her a penance unlike anything documented in the confession manuals of that era. He tells her to go home and write down every time she thinks of the merchant, every time she imagines him, every time she looks for him. She is to write the date, the time, and what she was doing when the thought came. She is to do this for 40 days. And at the end of 40 days, she is to bring the pages to him and burn them in front of the tabernacle at the oratory. She asks why. Don Bosco says, "Because you cannot defeat what you will not name." The woman leaves. Don Bosco sits alone in the confessional. He is exhausted. This is the 4th vision he has had in a week. They are coming more frequently now. He does not understand why God is showing him these things. He is just a priest. He's not a mystic. He did not ask for this, but he knows what he saw was real. Outside the confessional, the oratory is alive with noise. Boys are playing in the courtyard. Some are studying Latin. Some are learning trades, carpentry, printing, tailoring. Don Bosco created this place with nothing. When he started in 1841, he had no building, no money, no support, just a vision from when he was 9 years old. A dream where a woman, later revealed to be the Blessed Virgin Mary, told him he would tame wild animals and turn them into lambs. The animals were children, street children, orphans, delinquents, boys who slept in doorways and stole to survive and fought with knives over scraps of bread. For years, Don Bosco and his oratory wandered from place to place. Churches would let them meet in courtyards until the neighbors complained about the noise. Landlords would rent them buildings until they saw how many boys showed up. The city authorities thought Don Bosco was dangerous. A priest gathering hundreds of poor boys in one place could spark a revolution, or worse, spread disease, or simply be too loud. So they tried to stop him. They threatened him. They offered him money to leave Turin. Assassins were hired to kill him, but Don Bosco survived, partly through luck, partly through divine protection, and partly through a mysterious gray dog that appeared whenever he was in danger and disappeared when the danger passed. The boys called the dog Grigio. No one knew where it came from. No one could catch it. But it was always there when Don Bosco needed it, walking beside him on dark streets, standing between him and armed men, snarling at would-be killers until they ran, and then vanishing into the night. By 1862, Don Bosco has a permanent home for the oratory. The Basilica of Mary Help of Christians is under construction. His order, the Salesians, has been approved by the Pope. He is training priests to go to Argentina and Patagonia to evangelize indigenous peoples. He is writing books. He is corresponding with bishops all over Europe. He's a man of immense responsibility and influence. But in this moment, sitting alone in the confessional after the woman leaves, he is just a tired priest who has seen too much, who carries the weight of too many souls, who knows too many secrets. He thinks about all the marriages he has tried to save. Some succeeded, most did not. He has counseled wives whose husbands beat them. He has counseled husbands whose wives betrayed them. He has baptized children born from adultery and placed them in homes that would raise them as legitimate. He has written letters to the courts, pleading for leniency for women caught in infidelity. He has heard deathbed confessions from men who finally admitted to mistresses they kept for decades. And through it all, he has tried to hold up the church's teaching. Marriage is indissoluble. Fidelity is required. The sixth commandment stands. But he has also learned that the commandment alone is not enough. You cannot simply tell a drowning person not to drown. You have to throw them a rope. And for many married people, in turn, the rope is not separation. The rope is not even forgiveness in the abstract. The rope is practical, specific, day-by-day instruction in how to choose fidelity when every fiber of your being wants to choose escape. How to love someone who does not love you back. How to stay in a covenant that feels like a prison. How to find God in a marriage that looks nothing like what you imagined when you said your vows. This is what Don Bosco has become expert at. Not theology in the abstract, but theology in the mud. Faith that works when life is brutal and God feels absent and the person you promised to love forever has become a stranger. This is the faith he teaches the woman. Not a faith that makes everything better, but a faith that gives you the strength to endure, to choose rightly even when choosing rightly costs you everything you want, to die to yourself daily so that Christ can live in you, to let the cross break you so that resurrection can remake you. It is the same faith he teaches his boys. Most of them come from families where marriages are battlegrounds. They have watched their fathers drink and their mothers weep. They have heard plates smashing and seen bruises. They have been sent out of the house so their parents can fight without witnesses. They have grown up believing that marriage is suffering and love is a lie. Don Bosco is trying to show them something different, not through lectures, but through example, through watching him treat every woman with respect, through seeing him counsel married couples with patience, through hearing him say again and again that the purpose of marriage is not happiness, it is holiness. And holiness is sometimes found in choosing to stay when everything in you wants to leave. The biographical memoirs of St. John Bosco, Volume 7, page 143, record that Don Bosco had the supernatural ability to read the state of souls. Father Joseph Pius, his secretary and close collaborator for 14 years, testified that Don Bosco would often see souls approaching him in prayer, asking for help. These were not always living souls. Sometimes they were the dead. Sometimes they were souls in purgatory who needed prayers to be released. And sometimes, rarely, they were souls standing on the edge of damnation who came to him as a final warning. This gift terrified Don Bosco. He did not ask for it. He did not want it. In his private letters to his spiritual director, St. Joseph Cafasso, he wrote that the visions exhausted him physically and spiritually. After a particularly intense vision in April of 1864, he wrote, "I spent 3 days unable to eat. The weight of what I saw pressed on me like a stone. I do not understand why God shows me these things. I'm not worthy. I am just a poor priest trying to save boys from the streets." But Cafasso wrote back with words that would guide Don Bosco for the rest of his life. He said, "God does not give these visions to show you how powerful he is. He gives them to show you how much he loves his children. Every soul you see is a soul God is fighting for. He shows you the battle so that you can join him in it. Do not run from this gift. Embrace it. Use it. And trust that God will give you the strength to bear what he asks you to see." So Don Bosco continued. He sat in that confessional day after day, week after week, year after year. He heard confessions from prostitutes and thieves, from factory workers and merchants, from children and old men, from the devout and the desperate. And in many of those confessions, God showed him things that the penitent had not said, sins hidden out of shame, desires buried so deep the person themselves had forgotten they were there, spiritual wounds that had never healed because they had never been exposed to the light. And Don Bosco would gently, carefully tell them what he saw, not to shame them, not to expose them, but to free them, because he understood something that most confessors of his era did not understand. The sin you hide becomes the sin that owns you. The desire you refuse to name becomes the desire that controls you, and the wound you will not acknowledge becomes the wound that kills you. In May of 1865, Don Bosco shared a vision with his boys at the oratory. He told them he had seen one of their former students who had died the year before. The boy appeared to him in a dream and showed him the state of his soul. The boy had died in mortal sin. He had committed sins of impurity and had hidden them in confession out of shame. He was in hell. Don Bosco described the boy's face. It was twisted in agony. He was burning. But the worst part, Don Bosco said, was that the boy knew he could have been saved. He had opportunities to confess. He had been warned. He chose not to. And now it was too late. The boys who heard this were terrified. Many of them went to confession that night. Don Bosco's spiritual director, St. Joseph Cafasso, later wrote that Don Bosco's visions had a greater effect on the souls under his care than years of preaching. 3 weeks after the woman's confession, She returns. She brings 40 pages, each one filled with dates and times. She has counted. In 40 days, she thought of the merchant 287 times, sometimes 10 times in one day, sometimes in the middle of Mass, sometimes while putting her children to bed. Don Bosco takes the pages. They walk together to the chapel. He lights a candle in front of the tabernacle. He holds the pages over the flame. They catch fire immediately. The ink blackens and curls. The paper turns to ash. The woman watches. She is crying again, but this time it is different. Don Bosco turns to her and says, "Now confess." She kneels, and this time she confesses not just the act. She confesses the desire. She confesses the fantasy. She confesses the anger at her husband. She confesses the resentment toward her children for keeping her trapped in a life she does not want. She confesses the pride that told her she deserved better. She confesses the self-pity that made her believe she was the only one suffering. She confesses it all. When she finishes, Don Bosco gives her absolution. Then he tells her something he has never told anyone before. He says, "I saw your soul again last night. It was different. The weight was gone. You were free. But there is still work to do." He tells her that her marriage will not suddenly become easy. Her husband will not change overnight. Her loneliness will not disappear. But she now has a choice she did not have before. She can choose fidelity not because her husband deserves it, but because God is asking it of her. She can choose to love her children not because they bring her joy, but because they are the fruit of a vow she made before heaven. She can choose to stay not because she is trapped, but because staying is how she will become holy. This is the mystery of the sixth commandment. It is not just about avoiding sin. It is about becoming the kind of person who no longer wants to sin. The woman asks Don Bosco one more question. She asks if God can ever forgive someone who breaks a marriage vow. Don Bosco answers immediately, yes. God can forgive anything, but forgiveness does not erase consequence. A stone thrown into water creates ripples that go on forever. The adultery is forgiven, but the ripples remain. The trust is broken. The innocence is lost. The children see. The community knows. The wound heals, but the scar stays. He tells her that this is why the church guards marriage so fiercely. Not because the church is obsessed with sex, but because the church understands time. Every sin happens in a moment, but every sin echoes through generations. The Council of Elvira, in the year 300, Canon 8, stated that women who left their husbands without cause and joined themselves to other men were not to receive communion even at death, unless the man they left had died first. Canon 47 stated that if a Christian woman committed adultery while her husband was away and then did penance, she was not to receive communion until her husband returned. If he died before returning, she could receive communion only after long penance. These canons sound harsh to modern ears, but they reflect how seriously the early church took the marriage bond. It was not just a contract between two people. It was a covenant witnessed by God and the entire community of believers. To break it was not just a personal failure. It was an act of betrayal against the body of Christ itself. Don Bosco does not tell the woman all of this. He is not cruel, but he does tell her that the road ahead will be long. She will have to rebuild trust with her husband, even though he may never fully trust her again. She will have to live with the knowledge of what she did, even though she is forgiven. She will have to watch her children grow up and wonder if they can sense something broken in her. But he also tells her this. Every act of fidelity from this moment forward is a brick laid in the foundation of her salvation. Every time she chooses her husband over the memory of the merchant, she is storing up treasure in heaven. Every time she serves her children with love instead of resentment, she is cooperating with grace. And one day, whether in this life or the next, she will look back and see that God used her very brokenness to make her whole. The woman asks if she will see Don Bosco again. He says he does not know. He's getting older. The visions are exhausting him. He has work to do with the boys at the oratory. He is building a church. He is writing books. He is sending missionaries to South America. He does not have time to follow every soul through their entire journey. But he tells her this. If you die in a state of grace, I will see you in heaven. And if you die in a state of sin, I will pray for you in purgatory. Either way, you are not alone. The woman leaves. Don Bosco never sees her again. But in his memoirs, written years later, he mentions a confession he heard in 1862 that changed the way he thought about marriage. He does not give details. He never breaks the seal of confession. But he writes this, I learned that the greatest danger to a marriage is not hatred, it is loneliness. People do not leave their spouses because they despise them. They leave because they feel invisible. And the work of the church is not just to condemn adultery, it is to teach married couples how to see each other again. St. John Bosco died on January 31st, 1888 in Turin. He was 72 years old. At his funeral, the entire city shut down. Thousands lined the streets. The Pope sent a personal message. The newspapers called him the Apostle of Youth. But those who knew him best said he was something more. He was a shepherd who could see the wolves before they attacked. He was a physician who could diagnose the soul He was a prophet who looked at the present and saw eternity. The Salesian order he founded now operates in 134 countries. They run schools, orphanages, hospitals, and missions. They teach catechism to millions of children every year. They carry on the work Don Bosco started in a shed in Turin 160 years ago. But the thing they teach most is what Don Bosco taught that woman in 1862. Holiness is not about being perfect. It is about being honest. It is about bringing your hidden sins into the light. It is about naming the thing you do not want to name. It is about confessing not just what you did, but what you still want to do. It is about killing the longing before the longing kills you. The sixth commandment is not an arbitrary rule. It is a map. It shows you where the cliffs are. You shall not commit adultery. Why? Because adultery does not just break a promise. It breaks you. It fractures your identity. It divides your heart. It makes you a stranger to yourself. And once you are a stranger to yourself, you become a stranger to everyone else, including God. But the commandment is not the end of the story. After the law comes grace. After the fall comes the possibility of rising. After the sin comes the sacrament, confession, penance, absolution, restoration. Don Bosco saw souls his entire life. He saw boys who were heading toward hell and pulled them back. He saw priests who were losing their vocations and steadied them. He saw women trapped in abusive marriages and gave them hope. He saw men destroyed by addiction and showed them the way out. And he saw that woman in 1862 standing at a crossroads, and he told her the truth. You can still be saved. But you have to want it more than you want the thing that is killing you. The Catechism, paragraph 2382, concludes with this. The Lord Jesus insisted on the original intention of the Creator who willed that marriage be indissoluble. He abrogates the accommodations that had slipped into the old law. Between the baptized, a ratified and consummated marriage cannot be dissolved by any human power or for any reason other than death. This is the standard. Indissolubility. One man, one woman, one flesh, for life. It sounds impossible. And in human strength, it is impossible. But with God, all things are possible. Don Bosco believed this. He preached it. He lived it. And he saw what happened to those who rejected it. He saw the souls in purgatory burning away the desire that should have died on earth. He saw the marriages destroyed by a moment of weakness. He saw the children growing up in broken homes, learning from their parents that promises do not matter. He saw the cascade of consequences that followed every act of infidelity. And he wept. But he also saw something else. He saw the power of repentance. He saw souls that were dead come back to life. He saw marriages that were shattered become stronger than before. He saw women who had betrayed their husbands become models of fidelity. He saw men who had abandoned their families return and rebuild. He saw the miracle of grace, and that is the true story. Not that people sin. That is obvious. Everyone sins. The true story is that God does not leave us in our sin. He pursues us. He convicts us. He shows us, through people like Don Bosco, what we are becoming, and then he offers us a way out. Not an easy way, not a painless way, but a real way, a way that leads through death to resurrection, a way that requires us to let go of the thing we love more than God, a way that demands we choose fidelity even when fidelity costs us everything. The woman in Don Bosco's confessional made that choice. We do not know her name. We do not know what happened to her marriage. We do not know if her husband ever forgave her. We do not know if she ever stopped feeling lonely. But we know this. She brought her sin into the light. She named the desire. She burned the pages. She confessed completely, and she received absolution. That is all any of us can do. Bring the hidden thing into the light, name the desire, burn the pages, confess completely, and receive the mercy that God has been holding out to us since the moment we fell. Don Bosco's gift was not that he could see souls. His gift was that he could show people what they were about to become. He could look at a soul standing at a crossroads and say, this is where one path leads, and this is where the other path leads. Choose. And then he would step back and let them choose. Some chose well, some chose poorly, but all of them knew when they left his confessional that they had been seen, fully seen, by a priest who loved them enough to tell them the truth, by a man who had looked into eternity and come back to warn them, by a saint who would spend 50 years of his life pulling souls back from the edge of the abyss, one confession at a time. On February 4th, 2026, 164 years after that confession, the Church still teaches the same truth. Marriage is indissoluble. Adultery is a grave sin. But forgiveness is possible. Restoration is real. And every soul, no matter how far it has fallen, can still rise. The question is not whether God will forgive you. The question is whether you will bring your sin into the light, whether you will name the desire, whether you will burn the pages, whether you will confess completely, whether you will choose fidelity, even when every part of you wants to choose something else. Don Bosco saw a woman make that choice in 1862. He saw her soul before she made it, and he saw her soul after. The difference was the difference between death and life. between bondage and freedom, between a marriage that would limp along in quiet resentment for decades and a marriage that could be rebuilt on the foundation of hard-won honesty. That is what the sixth commandment protects. Not your reputation, not the institution, not even the marriage itself. It protects you. It protects the person you are supposed to become. It protects your soul from the slow poison of hidden desire. It draws a line and says, cross this line and you will become someone you do not recognize. Stay on this side and you will become the person God always meant you to be. Don Bosco spent his life helping people stay on the right side of that line. And when they crossed it, he helped them find their way back. Not with condemnation, not with shame, but with truth. Hard, clear, uncompromising truth. The kind of truth that hurts because it illuminates what you have been trying not to see. The kind of truth that heals because it shows you the way out. In the archives of the Salesian Order in Turin, there is a note in Don Bosco's handwriting from April of 1862. It says this: "Today I heard a confession that reminded me why I became a priest. Not to be comfortable, not to be respected, but to sit in a small wooden box and listen to people tell me the worst thing they have ever done, and then to tell them that God still loves them, and then to watch them walk out into the world lighter than they were when they came in. This is the work. This is all the work. Everything else is just preparation for this moment. That is the legacy of St. John Bosco. Not the schools he built, not the books he wrote, not even the visions he saw. His legacy is the thousands of souls who walked into his confessional carrying a secret they thought would destroy them, and walked out carrying the knowledge that they had been seen, fully seen, by someone who loved them anyway, by someone who told them the truth, by someone who showed them the way home. And that way is still open, for the woman who feels invisible in her marriage, for the man who is planning his escape, for anyone who has crossed the line and does not know how to get back. The way is confession. The way is honesty. The way is bringing the hidden thing into the light. The way is naming the desire. The way is burning the pages. The way is choosing fidelity, even when fidelity feels impossible. That is what Don Bosco saw. That is what he taught. That is what he lived. And that is what the church still proclaims today. Not because the church is obsessed with rules, but because the church has seen what happens when people ignore the rules. The church has buried the marriages. The church has counseled the children. The church has heard the confessions of 70-year-olds who are still haunted by what they did when they were 30. The church knows. The church has always known. And the church keeps teaching the same truth, generation after generation, hoping that this time someone will listen before it is too late. Don Bosco listened. And because he listened, he saved thousands of souls, including perhaps a woman in Turin in 1862 who came to him with a secret that was poisoning her from the inside, who knelt in a confessional and heard a priest say, "I see you. I see what you did. I see what you want to do. And I see what you can become if you let this go." She let it go. She burned the pages. She chose fidelity. And somewhere in heaven, or perhaps still in purgatory, working out the last effects of her sin, her soul is finally free. Free from the desire that once ruled her, free from the guilt that once crushed her, free from the loneliness that once drove her into the arms of a stranger. Free to be who she always was beneath the sin, a beloved daughter of God, a wife, a mother, a woman who fell and got back up, a sinner who became a saint. And that is the only story that matters. Not that we fall, but that we rise. Not that we sin, but that we repent. Not that we break our vows, but that we choose, every day, to keep them, even when keeping them costs us everything, especially when keeping them costs us everything, because that is when fidelity becomes holiness. That is when marriage becomes sacrament. That is when the covenant made on earth reflects the covenant made in heaven. And that is when we become finally, fully, completely the people God always meant us to be.